answering my phone 24/7. Listen, it was stressful at times, but I'll tell you, it's paid dividends now because that kind of responsiveness has given me a core group of customers who really appreciate that. They call and they're almost always getting my voice.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Tonight I'm joined by Danbury, Connecticut plumber Mike Lombardi. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding Podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Mike, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. You are easily my favorite plumber in the entire world.
I'm not sure how to respond to that, but that's quite a compliment. I think it's a compliment, so thank you.
So what have you been doing during the pandemic? Has it affected your business? You look healthy. Have you gotten vaccinated yet?
We did, and about 3 weeks ago, and we were lucky to get the single-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Were plumbers, considered essential folks? It seems like they should be.
And we were.
Yeah.
And essential and busy. The dynamic of the pandemic affected us. Most of my customers who have second homes in the country and on Candlewood Lake came early from the city or Boston or Westchester to their summer homes, and they brought a tribe with them. So toilets were overflowing. They were running out of hot water. Bathrooms that seldom get used were being overused. Water was leaking from one floor to the next. So we immediately were busy beyond belief. And it was a slow process in the beginning because we had the mask and gown, drop cloths everywhere, which we typically do anyway. People didn't want to be in the same room with us. And likewise for us, we were a little skittish in the beginning, but people were happy to see us.
Have you heard similar things from other tradespeople in your circle? Same deal?
Yes. Electricians, same issue, overwhelmed, heating professionals, same thing.
Have you had difficulty getting supplies and material like folks in the home building business?
Boy, that's a really good question. And yes, absolutely. The COVID has compromised the whole supply chain. So things that typically took 3 or 4 days took many weeks to get. So we were improvising quite a bit.
Fixing stuff that you would have ordinarily replaced or, making do?
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. What about the supply houses? They must have had to change the way they do business. All of a sudden, you can't have people standing in front of a counter ordering plumbing parts. How does that work?
Yeah, so the first few months, it was wait up, call in your order, wait outside, pick up. There's a name for that. They did it in grocery stores and hardware store, anywhere. Yeah, curbside pickup.
Yeah. And how did you like that? Was it a obstacle? Or was it just a fact of life? Did you miss seeing your people at the counter every day?
You do miss the eye-to-eye contact and the banter, seeing other contractors in the supply house. So yeah, there was an adjustment to get used to that, but everyone did. And then it evolved from curbside or dock pickup to plexiglass barriers, everyone's mask, some double mask and a face shield. Careful about how you're handling things when I'm in a supply house where I don't have an account and we got to handle a credit or debit card. So it was a complication in the beginning, but I'll tell you. And then forgetting the mask, getting out of the truck initially.
Sure.
But that became, it almost seems normal now.
Yeah, I agree. I remember this weird feeling when you get back in the car after going somewhere and like not knowing what order to sanitize your hands because then you've touched the keys to get in the car and you're like, it's so bizarre. So bizarre.
Interestingly, we were remodeling a bathroom for a family member in another town, and COVID was just becoming a scare. And I had a case of N95 masks on the shelf in my shop. And it turned out to be important because you couldn't get one in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get hand sanitizer. So we scrambled.
Are you able to get those things now? Like, 'cause I still can't buy N95 masks, even though I think, I could make an argument that as a journalist, it's essential work or whatever, but I'm not able to. Are you able to get that stuff now?
After many trips to various places, Staples. I was in Staples back in September, and they had a display right as you walk in with masks.
Did you keep going back in to buy more and more?
I did get a couple of boxes.
Yeah, sure.
So I changed the color of my mask as a disguise in between. So it worked out.
You have been a plumber a long time, I might say, and there's no judgment in that. How did you become a plumber, and when was that, Mike?
Well, I guess I started going with my dad when I was in my early teens, 12, 13, 14 years old. He was a moonlighter. He sold plumbing ware. During the day, he was a salesperson for a local supply house. But he would do side work. So I would go with him and hold the light. I didn't like that part very much, but
because you were
eventually,
bored, or you just didn't like being on fixing pipes?
I wanted to be using the tools.
Uh-huh.
So that was the beginning. And then I had a job in a dairy farm, which was in our neighborhood. And that's where I really learned how to fix things, although I didn't know it at the time. I was just a kid with a job. But farmers are some of the most resourceful people on the planet. Especially dairy farmers, because the cows have to be milked twice a day. So you got to make things work.
And you're relying on a lot of machinery and stuff, right?
It was my first experience with a ball cock. So there were 100 or so head of cows, and they watered year round from a cement cistern that was in the barnyard. And it was a large ball, just like an old-fashioned toilet ball cock, that let water in year round. As cold as it was in the winter, the cows drank so much water around the clock, it wouldn't freeze. And that ball cock would let the water in. So,
and you obviously had to fix that at some point and
take it apart, put new leathers around the seal, put new washers in it, replace the ball, a big copper ball. He's about the size of a volleyball, it seems, at the time.
It's funny you mentioned volleyball, because you play volleyball too, right?
Well, I did. Of course, my children did, and they were a lot of fun following them around. But I had some fun too. We actually had a team called the Fairfield Fossils. After we all turned 50, we would travel around to tournaments, and we were quite well known, mostly for the name, not for the skill level.
As I recall, you went to college and got a degree. I believe it was in physical education or physical training, because we had a conversation about Slippery Rock one time where I went to school, and that's a big deal there.
Yeah, so I went to Mitchell College in New London. At the time, it was a junior college, 2 years. I was a phys ed major. After 2 years, quite a few of the students there went to Slippery Rock to complete their 4 years. So I did I got an associate's degree, and then I did an additional year in Castleton, Vermont, as a phys ed major, with elementary education as a minor. But then I got back into the workplace because at the time, if I finished my bachelor's degree, the starting salary in Vermont would have been about $8,400 a year. And I was making triple that already as a plumber, because I had worked in the plumbing trade for 4 years before I went back to school.
Did you find that you had a natural knack for it to be a plumber?
I did. I really did. Things made sense to me, how they went together. And I was inquisitive. I wanted to know why things were done the way they were done. And back then, you always didn't get the answer. You had to figure it out for yourself.
Do you still like that about being a plumber, figuring things out and learning new stuff?
That's the really great thing about this trade. Technology just keeps changing the way we do things. PEX tubing, PVC, microprocessors controlling thermostats and water heaters and flames and protection safety devices. So that part of it, it's changing. So you have to change the way you think about things.
I'm guessing when you started in the business, like steam heat and very low tech systems were the norm, and it must be impressive and somewhat scary to see the changes that have happened in equipment and in technology.
It's not scary, but it can be confusing and challenging. But yeah, the way things have gotten smaller, that's the really big thing. And some of the warm air furnaces I worked on were all gravity. They drew cold air. They were fired with coal or wood. They drew cold air in from the basement, had one large grate in the floor and the main room in the house. And then they put duct onto it, a big shroud, a big plenum. And then they put an oil burner in it at some point. So there was an evolution there, but efficiency was never the goal. It was just to stay
Not freezing
warm.
to death.
Exactly.
But yet we have all these comfort complaints. I'm sure you'd agree. Your clients call you about comfort complaints. Like somehow 100 years ago or 50 years ago, there was less of that. Can you explain that to me?
Well, I think it's because people were happy to have any kind of heat back in the day. There wasn't there were newspapers sometimes, and the exterior walls was the only insulation. And part of the reason for not having insulation, they didn't want the houses too tight. There were diseases that could propagate if your house was too tight. So in New York City, they had steam heat from the turn of the century, and they oversized it by triple because they wanted people to leave their windows open for fresh air.
It's crazy the full circle we've come with regard to that subject, right? All of a sudden, ventilation and air filtration and air exchange is now all anew again, right?
Yeah, the houses have gotten so tight, now you have to introduce outdoor air so you don't get stagnant inside. And I think it's all, efficiency is one thing, comfort is another, and then there's let's get rid of the greenhouse gases. Let's try to reduce them. And I'm all in favor of it. I think it's a great thing, the way we're evolving with central heating.
Most folks say, and I tend to believe them, that we're moving toward a completely electric-based economy, right? Fossil fuels are going away. Electricity will replace them. How do you feel about that as a plumber who's worked on, fossil-fueled appliances your whole life?
I welcome it. I'm a believer in let's reduce the amount of fossil fuel that we're burning. And I'm not worried about it from a work standpoint because I'm going to be retiring. But I don't think this is going to take over in the next decade. I think it's going to be decades. So there's a lot of people that still believe in the old way, what's becoming the old way. Oil burners and gas burners, propane, electricity. It's going to be a big change, I think, to existing homes. But in the future, they'll be building in a way that the electrical will become the fuel of choice.
You and I have talked about your business has had at least 2 iterations that I know of. At one time, you had many employees, and how many plumbers did you have working for you, and how many office people? Yeah,
I had 4 trucks at one time, 3 plumbers and 2 helpers and a full-time office staff.
That sounds like a very successful business. Why give it up? What made you scale down?
Well, the economy went sour in 2007, 2008, and I had to lay off some employees. It was a hard time for me because I never went through anything like that. Yeah. So the work dried up, building almost stopped completely, and remodeling, which is really was the core of our business at the time. So I kept my top guy, who you know very well, Tyson, and fortunately, my guys had good training, and it wasn't just by me. They were good people, and they were all able to get jobs. So we all made out pretty well.
So now, as I understand, it's you and Tyson, and you guys do service work, and you work for some selective builders and remodelers, and you also do bath remodeling. Am I leaving anything out?
No, but interesting that you brought that up, and it's something I wish I had gotten into sooner. You know, the bath remodeling evolved because a plumber gets called when there's a leak, and it's not always a water pipe or a DWV leak. Well, a lot of times it's
shower
water seal. Yeah, shower water seal failure from a tile job that's old and loose and missing.
And most are done poorly anyway, right?
Yeah, a lot are done poorly. I don't blame anyone. I don't assign fault or blame, but I'm happy that it's there. So I wished I had gotten into that sooner because what's happened now, Patrick, especially in Fairfield and Westchester County, to do service and repair work, you spend a lot of time behind the wheel of the truck. You know, the infrastructure provides water and sewer, electricity, gas for these condominium projects, but they don't improve the roads. They can't handle the traffic. So we get stuck in the traffic. The cost of being in business escalates. So it's just difficult to do the service and repair work. What you get to bathroom remodeling, where you're going to the same job for 2 to 10 weeks, your overhead costs drop. You're having 6 or 7, sometimes 8 hours a day of productive work, and you're not fighting the traffic and trying to meet your overhead on 3 or 4 billable hours a day.
I mean, you obviously have to bill clients for the time you spend in the truck. I mean, you're doing it one way or the other. You know, you're either directly billing or your hourly rate has to cover that. Do folks lose their mind when they see what it costs to get a plumber to fix something in a house?
Well, sometimes. Now, that's another thing I wish I had done sooner is not charged by the hour. I try to price every job now. Some people call it flat rate pricing. So every task you assign a value for, and you let the people know beforehand. And people are more comfortable knowing how much they're going to spend before you get started. Now, the challenge is getting to the point to give them a price. And I try not to do free estimates anymore because it just becomes a free estimate.
Yeah.
So most of my work now is referral. Somehow I had a relationship or someone knows me. And in those cases, I may go to an extended family member and look at something and give them some advice and get the work. But I tried now to charge a consultation fee. And then if we come to an agreement on a price, I deduct the consultation fee from the cost of the work. So that works out some of the time.
From my observation, you've made a pretty good middle-class life for yourself. You've educated your kids. You seem to like what you do. Are the headaches of owning your own business and the physical toil been worth it, do you think?
I would say so, because for me, I stayed in my own business so I could steal away and participate in my kids' lives while they're in school. They all played some kind of sport. One of them did some theater. I was able to go and participate in all that. So the after-hours phone calls, answering my phone 24/7. Listen, it was stressful at times, but I'll tell you, it's paid dividends now because that kind of responsiveness has given me a core group of customers who really appreciate that. They call and they're almost always getting my voice or a return phone call shortly.
Do you still answer in the middle of the night?
I do. And if it's not an emergency, I'll wait till the morning to respond. But you know your customers. Some of them just want to hear your voice, and
Yeah, know that
gives them some reassurance.
you're going to help them, right? They want some assurance that their problem is going to be taken care of by someone they trust.
Exactly, and it's interesting because we haven't advertised in 10 years, so I'm not getting
tire kickers.
A lot of tire kickers, people with emergencies. So, and I don't mind getting them if I'm around and available, but I don't get a lot of them.
I think you'd agree that when people need a plumber, they're happy to see you. Are people generally respectful of you and Tyson when you come to their house? I mean, you've said just now that you work for repeat customers. I'm sure you like them and they like you, but has it always been that way?
I use the term the one percenters. Some people use the one percenters for another something or other having to do with people's income, but the one percenters are the 1 in 100 that are just people that just don't get it, and they give you so much trouble from the beginning. You try to be sincere and honest, and they just don't get it. So there's gonna be some of those people, no matter what. It's hard.
Any horrible stories you're willing to share?
Oh my God. There's so many. It's hard to pick out one. So many. There's enough that really turned my hair white. We did a large, interesting job where the homeowner went to Florida every winter, just had someone do a drive-by of their home, never go in the winter to make sure the heat is on. So the homeowner called me, and it was first week of February, and he said, I just got my gas bill from Connecticut. He called me from Florida. And I didn't use any gas the whole month of January.
Oh, no.
So the alarm company did send me an alert the first week of January, and they said it was a break-in. So the police car was dispatched, but they drove up to the house, and there were no tire tracks in the snow in the driveway and no footprints. The policeman walked around the house, didn't see anything. So it turned out the whole house froze. The heat didn't come on the first week of January. The water pump ran until it burned out. They were lucky they didn't have a major flood, because where their water piping came into the mechanical room, there was a drain that led to a pond. So the pipe that froze and broke, typically pipes freeze, it warms up and they don't leak, but then it warms up a little bit. The ice blockage will melt, and then you'll have a hemorrhage. So the water ran down this pipe into their pond, and but they did have completely frozen and broken pipes, and the pipes were routed through their attic. Someone had made a box, and because the house was on a slab, someone made a box and filled it around the piping and filled it with vermiculite, and then put a seal on it. Well, when the heat goes out, the attic still gets cold. There's no source of heat. So we had to reroute the piping in the house, and we couldn't get to all of it. Some of the drops that used to come from the attic down to the fixtures in the walls, we left. So we were 95% done, and they complained weekly about this screeching noise, but we could never hear it when we were there. And they held back the last payment, which was substantial. So finally, we went there, and after many weeks of being called every name in the book, and why can't you solve the problem? And it turns out this problem had existed their whole life in this home, but now it was our responsibility to fix it. So we opened another wall, and there were the hot and cold pipe coming from overhead were held in place by bent over nails. And when these pipes had frozen and expanded but not split, they moved the nails enough so that occasionally they would rub when a particular toilet would fill up and shut off, or they would turn a handle in a faucet somewhere in the house. They couldn't pinpoint it, but they were more intent about not making the last payment than they were about this tiny
They just
nuisance
needed an
noise.
excuse to
They
not
needed
pay
an
you.
excuse. So we ended up fixing it, and it all ended well.
And then you never answered their call again, I'm sure.
Yeah, they were. They moved to Florida full time. That incident, that was enough for them.
So how do you get good clients who trust your judgment and pay you on time and appreciate your work? It seems like you have a number.
So it's a process. It's not a singular event. Work for good contractors. I was so lucky to work for really good contractors who have good customers. So there's a common thread there. They're doing good work. They want you to do good work. The people appreciate that the contractor is there bringing in someone that does good work and is neat, doesn't smoke in the house. And that's something that's changed. Oh my God. We all used to, Tyson and I joke about it, but everybody smoked. We smoked in we had lunch in the kitchen with them. Everybody's smoking. I'm 40 years ago. But getting back to the getting good customers, it's a process of working for good people. The people you're working for recognize what they're getting. They really see the value. And then referrals. So those people tell someone else, and you go because you were referred by someone who respects you. And it's easy to respect those people because they respect you, and then so easy to respect them.
I love talking to you always. It's been a joy having you on the show. Thanks to Mike Lombardi for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Tune in next week for the second half of my 2-part interview with plumber Mike Lombardi. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.